Bright red hair, freckles, and giant blue eyes. They would beckon happiness and warmth. They would plead with your soul to love her and treat her kind and soft, tenderly. I loved her almost immediately, where everyone else was exasperated from her pain and discomfort. She would feel so intensely. Her wiry frame would ball up and cry or jump on tables with mouthfuls of candy. When we became friends, she would hug me sideways and pat me on the back. It was quick, difficult. Distance and safety, space and comfort were important. She had been abused, severely abused. Her family sold her to sexual slavery from the age of 5 to the age of 13. But when she met me, she worked her way through the discomfort, and she would put her ear on my chest and sneak her arm around my back and pat it. Then she would pull away and divert her eyes until they rolled up at me to see my reaction. As our friendship grew, she would hug me more and grab me with excitement of sugar coursing through her veins. She would wrap her arms full around me and she would kiss my cheek. Every new display of intimacy was awkward and difficult. With me as a loyal friend and with the many lovers I would see destroy her heart. When she was 13, she ran away and found dope. She had found men who would take her in and give her drugs. They would tell her they loved her. She would want so desperately to be loved that she would believe them. But she didn't know what love was, and she would mistake idle words for truth. She knew only that love should be eternal, that love should mean that you would make her feel safe when she didn't, that you would hug her and hold her when she felt alone and scared. She knew love from romantic comedies and TV shows. She knew that her mother had said she loved her all along, with the men that molested her as a child and raped her repeatedly. But it didn't equal what she'd seen on TV and heard from the rest of the world, so she sought it like a long hidden treasure, buying into every shifty bard selling a fake map. When her depression or clinging kicked in, it became too much for her lovers and they would leave her. So she would seek death. Plastic razor blades would meet wrists and bottles of pills were consumed. She would make a last-ditch effort for someone to save her before she jumped. And all her closest friends knew the routine, had all made trips to the mental institutions, had all dropped her off and picked her up with enough frequency to know the names of doctors and nurses. One time she scraped away at her wrist for so long that she had actually broken skin. The scratches stung and itched, and she complained that it hurt. These are when I got the best hugs, when she would curl her entire 30-year-old wiry frame into me, and she would hold me like a lifeline, and she would cry, or she would have just finished crying, and she would dart away like a scared child, brushed off the tears, and remember that people were dangerous and not to be trusted. She would move away from me, but she would look up at me and do her best to smile, to let me know everything was okay. It was 2 a.m. I got a call from her saying she was in a parking lot of a shopping center with no pants or shoes. It was about a 5-minute run from her house, which is how she had gotten there. She had left her keys and her pants at the house where her now ex-lover had abandoned her. I was in bed with my partner who so sweetly told me to go and help her. So I arrived to pick up my half-naked friend, only to find that her ex-lover was there with her pants and keys, and I knew him. He was older, rich, at least well off. She was barefoot and on the curb. He was inside a nice car. Neither would look at each other. Occasionally, he would beckon her to get in the car, and she would refuse like a stubborn child, and eventually she broke her silence. She berated him. "You said you loved me." She would yell at him. "You said you'd always be there. That you would take care of me." And he looked confused. Did she really believe him when he said those things? He asked himself. But he answered, "You're fucking crazy." She screamed more at him until he drove away. When the car was out of sight, she dropped. Every ounce of courage drained, and she wept. She contemplated suicide again, but I didn't take her to the hospital this time. I brought her home, and my partner was waiting with hot tea and a snack. We laid her down, and she slept. So I had this story about how I came to find my higher power. was in a bar in Santa Barbara, and this guy wouldn't shake my hand, so I asked him if he was angry, and he said, "Fuck you," which I took as a yes. And I asked him if he wanted to fight, and he did. So I realized he was a bit bigger than me, and I backed up a few steps to take off my jacket and my hat, and I said, "This is going to be a one-on-one fight, right?" And his friends were flocking to him from all angles, and I was surrounded, and I got my hands up ready, and 3 fists pummeled me simultaneously, and I dropped to my knee, and I tackled him, and we rolled around, and people tried to kick me, and it took some kicks and some punches, and some cops arrived, and they broke it up quickly, and I stood outside the curb with me on one side and the police in the middle, and 9 of them on the other. And I would reflect on that moment in the morning and realize 2 things. One, that I had a drinking problem. And 2, that no matter what, 9 people are always going to be a force greater than myself. So I would talk about this often with friends because they were the people that kept me in a good orderly direction. If things went bad, I would talk about it with 9 other people. I would get a group consensus. My relationships would grow over the years as I came to trust and rely on people more for a sense of morality, to lean on them in my times of pain. And so when I sat with her on the porch in the morning, drinking coffee and smoking cigarettes, she was a singer, so she would just take puffs of mine. She leaned over the railing of the porch and she looked at me and she asked me if she was one of the 9. And I looked at her confused. She explained about my story. She asked if I was one of the 9, if she was one of the 9, and I smiled. And my heart brimmed over with love for her. With misty tears in my eyes, I told her yes, and she always will be. So one note I'd like to make is that she was a singer, that I never saw her sing. She was too shy to do it when we were alone, and I showed up at one of her acts one time, but she had just stepped off the stage and she was sweaty and everyone was telling her what a good singer she was, and she was surrounded by underground jazz and R&B players, and she was the belle of the ball, but I never knew that side of her. One of those magical moments you wish you got to experience, and I never did. When I went to prison, she wrote the judge a letter before she knew why I was arrested. She told the judge that I had always been there for her, that I was a stand-up guy. I needed the letter, but I knew she might not have written it if she knew the full contents of my crime. Sure enough, she would come to find out, and she wrote me once to tell me she wasn't mad at me, that she loved me, forgave me, and I never heard from her again. I heard rumors that she had moved to LA. When I got out of prison, I misstyled a friend of mine. I heard her voice on the receiver. She was in tears, crying. She called me a bastard, asked me how I dare call her. I cried with her. She was crying so hard she couldn't talk. She told me never to call her again, and I never did. The end. Thank you.
Yeah.